Sirens tore through the silence of that morning, as if the neighborhood itself sensed that something irreversible had happened. Neighbors watched in shock as police officers surrounded with yellow tape what until a few days ago had been known as the House of Flowers. The well-kept garden now showed marks of something being dragged through the earth, and for the first time, no one smiled from that balcony. "When was the last time you saw the girl?" the policeman asked the trembling neighbor. "Almost a week," Paula murmured. "They were always out together. They seemed so happy." Detective Mauricio knelt down beside the rose bed. A colorful bracelet, half buried, shone beneath the turned earth. It was simple, made of plastic beads, with the name Júlia engraved on it. Anna used to say that that bracelet was her daughter's talisman. Júlia didn't even take it off to sleep. "We found something," Mauricio shouted to the team. On televisions across the country, Anna and Júlia's faces appeared on alert. Mother and daughter last seen 6 days ago. Stepfather, Carlos Mendez, also known as Ricardo, is wanted for questioning. In the picture, the trio smiled like a perfect family. But what that photo hid would soon become the darkest secret of Mauricio's career, and of the history of that city. The Martins' house was known in the neighborhood as the House of Flowers. It was beautiful, with a garden that drew attention. Every Saturday, Carlos would take care of the plants with the same affection he said he had for his family. To those passing by on the street, that house looked like a postcard of a perfect family. Carlos, the attentive stepfather; Anna, the devoted mother; and Júlia, a 12-year-old girl with curious eyes and an easy smile. "That man loves my daughter as if she were his own," Anna would tell her friends while drinking coffee. The three of them appeared in smiling photos on social media. Vacations at the beach, Júlia in Carlos's arms, birthdays with colorful balloons. But inside that house, far from the eyes of the neighbors, a different story unfolded in whispers. Júlia, once a talkative child, now spoke less and less. Her eyes, once bright, now scanned the corners of the house as if searching for something hidden. "She's just going through a difficult phase," Anna explained to herself, repeating what Carlos said. But on the nights she was alone when her husband worked the night shift, something bothered her. A heavy silence had settled over her house since Carlos had moved in 2 years ago. A silence that no one could explain, but that everyone felt. Anna met Carlos at a fragile time. Widowed for only 6 months, she was still mourning the sudden death of her husband when Carlos showed up to fix the plumbing in her kitchen. He was kind, listened to her stories, and returned the next day with a book that he said had helped his sister after she lost someone. Within 3 months, he was already sleeping there. Within 6 months, he was already part of the family. "You saved us," Anna said the night he officially moved in. At first, Júlia liked him too. Carlos picked her up from school, helped her with her homework, and brought her a dog that she had wanted so much. But everything started to change when he got a better job. Now he worked alternating shifts, sometimes during the day, sometimes at night. That's when the strange things started. Objects moved around. Júlia's diary disappeared. The girl started locking her room, even though she didn't have a key. "I'm scared, Mom," she said one night. Anna asked why. "I can't explain it," Júlia replied, hugging her knees. Anna talked to Carlos about it. "Children invent things, love." "My niece also had imaginary friends when she was her age," he replied, kissing her forehead. It was the teacher who first noticed something wrong. In a meeting with Anna, she showed the girls drawings, dark figures, a house without doors, and a man who was too big compared to the others. "I noticed that Júlia is quieter. She gets scared when someone touches her," the teacher explained. Anna felt her stomach sink. At home, she began to observe more. She noticed that Júlia avoided being alone with Carlos. When he arrived, she ran to her room. When he spoke, she looked at the floor. "Did you two fight?" Anna asked her daughter one afternoon. No, Júlia answered too quickly. Then why are you acting differently around him? The girl remained silent, then said, He looks at me in a strange way, Mom. Anna felt a shiver. That night she couldn't sleep. She remembered how Carlos always insisted on bathing Júlia when she was younger. How he always wanted to take pictures of her in the pool, on the beach. The clothes he bought were always a little tighter than they should be. Anna sat up in bed, sweating. Was she imagining things? Was she being unfair to the man who brought stability to her life? Doubt grew like a weed in the perfect garden Anna thought she had. She began to ask silent questions. Why did Carlos insist that Júlia sit on his lap, even though she was already too big for it? Why did he enter her room without knocking? Why did he insist on staying with her when Anna went out? One night, after Carlos left for work, Anna found Júlia crying under the covers. What's wrong, my love? She asked, sitting on the bed. Nothing, the girl replied, but her body was shaking. You can tell me anything, Anna insisted, holding her daughter's hands. Promise you won't get mad? Júlia asked, her eyes full of tears. Anna promised, feeling her heart race. He said it's normal, that all fathers do that to their daughters, Júlia began, in a low voice, as if the walls could hear. But it hurts, Mom, and I'm disgusted. Anna felt the world spin. That night, she didn't sleep. Sitting in the dark kitchen, she reviewed every moment of the past 2 years, every sign she ignored, every excuse she accepted. How had she not noticed before? Anna planned everything in secret. She packed her bags while Carlos worked. She bought bus tickets to her sister's city, 500 kilometers away. She took out money little by little so as not to raise suspicions. She prepared Júlia, saying only that they would go on a surprise trip. But that morning, when they were ready to leave, Carlos's car parked in front of the house. He never came back at that time. Never. I forgot some documents, he said as he entered. His eyes stopped on the bags near the door. Anna saw his face change, like a mask falling off. Are you going for a walk? He asked with a calmness that did not match his eyes. We're going to visit my sister, Anna replied, trying to sound normal. That's great. Why didn't you tell me? I'll take you, he insisted, his voice now too sweet. No need, I already called a taxi, Anna said. Carlos locked the door and put the key in his pocket. No one is going anywhere, he said, finally showing what he was hiding behind his smile. Anna pushed Júlia behind her. Get out of the way, Carlos ordered. That was when Anna realized what he was holding, a hammer he used to fix things in the garden. The rain was falling heavily that morning. Paula, the Martins' neighbor for 5 years, noticed something strange. The house had been completely closed for 2 days. Not even Carlos had gone out to take care of the garden on Saturday, as he always did. She tried to call Anna, but no one answered. They must have gone away, she thought, although she found it strange that Anna hadn't said anything. On Monday, Paula saw Carlos leaving alone, carrying a large suitcase. He waved as if nothing was wrong. Where are Anna and Júlia? Paula asked from the sidewalk. They went to visit her sister. I'll meet them later, she replied with her usual smile. But something in his eyes made Paula shiver. That night, Paula saw lights on in the house, but no movement. On Tuesday, Carlos's car was no longer there. The curtains were still closed. In the trash in the house, wrapped in black bags, Paula saw something that looked stained red. Maybe paint, she thought, but why so many bags? Worried, she tried to call Anna again. Nothing. She sent messages, no response. Her intuition was screaming that something was very wrong. That's when she remembered that Anna had mentioned being worried about Júlia weeks ago. How the girl was different, more withdrawn. Paula decided to call the police. We have no reason to enter the house without permission, the police officer said when he arrived. They've been away, according to the husband. There are no signs of a break-in. Everything seems normal. Paula insisted that something was wrong. Anna would never leave the garden unattended, and she would never go away without telling someone. The officer asked for Anna's sister's number. Paula didn't have it. "Look, ma'am, we can't break into private property based on a hunch." Paula felt angry. "What if waiting means something terrible has already happened?" he asked. The officer sighed. "Here's what we'll do. File a police report. If they don't show up in 48 hours, we can investigate further." Paula knew that wasn't enough. That night, she logged onto Facebook and messaged all of Anna's friends. No one had heard of any travel. Anna's sister, when she finally reached her, said she wasn't expecting anyone to visit. It was then that Paula noticed something disturbing. Anna's profile was active. Someone had posted a photo of her with Júlia and Carlos saying, "Well-deserved vacation with the family." The photo was old, taken months before. And the worst part, the comments received replies as if Anna were online. But Paula was sure it wasn't Anna who was replying to those messages. The gardener who worked next door saw it. He saw Carlos dragging something heavy rolled up in a rug to the car in the middle of the night. He saw dark stains on the garden path being hosed down afterwards, but he didn't say anything. "None of my business," he thought. Now, with the police asking around the neighborhood, so Jose felt the weight of the silence. "I saw something strange on Friday night," he finally admitted. Ms. Anna's husband carrying something large to the car. It looked heavy. Detective Mauricio wrote down every word. This was his third missing person case that month, but something about this one bothered him deeply. "Did you see what it was?" he asked. "No, it was dark. It looked like a rolled-up rug," Jose replied. "Did you see Ms. Anna or the girl after that?" Jose shook his head. "No sign of them." The detective got a warrant to enter the house. The smell was the first thing they noticed. A heavy, sweet, and rotten odor at the same time. In the kitchen, the sink was too clean, shining with so much product. But behind the stove, they found splatters. Small, dark brown drops. In the bathroom drain, more splatters. In the basement, an empty space where a large Persian rug had once stood. "We need to find Carlos," the detective said. And fast. Anna's sister was in shock. "She called me last week," she said through tears. She said she was worried about Júlia, that she was going to do something about it. Detective Mauricio asked if Anna had mentioned Carlos. "Not directly, but I felt it was about him." Anna seemed scared. "I should have insisted more. I should have gone over there." Meanwhile, the forensic team found more evidence in the house. Strands of hair in the basement, a bloodstain under the mattress, Júlia's diary hidden in the back of a drawer with pages torn out, and something disturbing. On Carlos's computer, hundreds of photos of girls. Among them, Júlia, in situations that made even the most experienced police officers look away. "This man is a predator," Mauricio concluded, "and I don't think it's the first time." A background check revealed what Carlos was hiding. His real name was Ricardo Mendez. He had abuse cases in 2 different cities, but he always disappeared before the trial. He always used the same method. He approached vulnerable women with daughters. "We need to send out a national alert," Mauricio ordered. "This man cannot disappear again." Carlos's, or rather Ricardo's, photo was spread across all media outlets. His car was found abandoned near the bus station, which suggested he had fled by bus. The police reviewed the camera footage. In one of them, they saw Ricardo buying a ticket to the north of the country. He was wearing a cap and sunglasses, but it was him. The search focused in that direction. Meanwhile, the Martins' house was thoroughly searched. In the garden, the sniffer dogs indicated something buried under the rose bushes, the same ones Ricardo tended to every Saturday. Digging, they found buried items of clothing, a child's pajamas, women's shoes. He wanted to get rid of any trace of them, the detective explained. The search for the body continued in the region's woods and vacant lots. Drones flew over rural areas. Divers checked lakes and dams. Nothing was found. "It's possible he took the bodies far away," Mauricio theorized in a meeting. He had enough time. The team worked day and night. For many, this case became personal. It wasn't just about finding a criminal. It was about getting justice for Ana and Júlia. It was about stopping Ricardo from hurting anyone else, because, with his history, everyone was sure, if he wasn't caught, he would start over somewhere else, with another family, with other victims. 2 months later, Ana and Júlia's case was no longer making headlines. Other tragedies were taking its place. But Detective Mauricio did not give up. On his wall, a map marked all the places where Ricardo could be. All the clues, no matter how small. That was when he received the call that would change everything. "I see that man on TV," said a female voice. It was a gas station attendant in a small town 700 kilometers away. "He's wearing a beard now, but I'm sure it's him." Mauricio immediately mobilized the local police. "Don't approach him, just observe and confirm his identity," he ordered. Within a few hours, confirmation arrived. It was indeed Ricardo. He was staying in a cheap guest house using the name Pedro. And most disturbing of all, he was already getting close to a local woman, a widow with a young daughter. The story was repeating itself like a nightmare. The police set up a silent operation. They didn't want him to notice and run away again. The next morning, when Ricardo went out to buy cigarettes, he was surrounded. He had no chance to react. In the handcuffs, his face showed no regret, only anger at having been caught. During the ride back, Ricardo remained silent. His cold eyes watched the road, as if calculating something. Mauricio sat down in front of him. "Where are they, Ricardo?" he asked directly. Ricardo smiled, an empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Who?" he replied, feigning confusion. Mauricio didn't fall for the provocation. "Ana and Júlia Martins. We know what you did. We have the evidence, your record, the photos on your computer." Ricardo kept the same smile. "Prove it," he challenged. Mauricio felt his blood boil. This man was joking, knowing the suffering he had caused. "You will spend the rest of your life in prison," he said, "unless you tell us where the bodies are. That could reduce your sentence." Ricardo leaned forward, his eyes now shining with something like amusement. "What if there are no bodies?" he whispered. Mauricio frowned. "What do you mean? Have you considered that they might be alive?" Ricardo continued, his smile now wider. "Hidden somewhere? Too scared to show up?" Mauricio watched closely. Was it possible? Or was this just another sick game? "If they're alive, tell me where they are," he demanded. Ricardo sat back, pleased with the confusion he had caused. "This will cost more than a reduced sentence," he replied. At the police station, Ricardo was placed in an interrogation room. For hours, he denied any involvement. "They left. I don't know where they went after that," he insisted. When confronted with the evidence, the blood, the buried clothes, the photos, he simply shrugged. "Ana cut her finger cooking. I buried the old clothes because she asked me to. The photos are just family mementos." His answers were measured, rehearsed. But then Mauricio changed strategy. "We found the shovel mark in your trunk," he lied. "We know you buried something heavy in the northern region. The dogs are already searching there." It was the first time Ricardo seemed genuinely surprised. "Impossible," he muttered. "I cleaned everything up." Realizing his mistake, he immediately shut his mouth. But it was too late. The accidental confession had been recorded. Mauricio pressed. "Where, Ricardo? Where did you bury them?" Ricardo looked up at the ceiling, as if considering his options. Finally, he said, "If I tell you, I want a deal. Prison in a separate wing. No other inmates." Mauricio knew that child killers were targets at the prison. Ricardo knew too. "It's up to the prosecutor, not me," he said. "But I can recommend it if you cooperate fully." The map Ricardo had drawn led the police to a remote area, a dense forest 50 kilometers from the city. "I buried her near that big rock," he wrote on the paper. A team was sent immediately. They dug for hours, following the instructions. They found a blanket stained with blood, pieces of cloth, but no body. When confronted again, Ricardo looked confused. "They must have been there. I put them there." Mauricio banged the table in frustration. "Stop playing games. Tell the truth." It was then that Ricardo made a disturbing revelation. "I only buried Ana there. Júlia is somewhere else." His face changed, a mask falling away. His eyes had a sickly gleam as he continued, "But not alone. Others are with her, others that no one has looked for." The words caused an icy silence in the room. "Others? What others?" Mauricio asked, feeling a knot in his stomach. Ricardo smiled again. "I've been doing this for longer than you can imagine. Before Ana, there was Mariana and her daughter Laura. Before them, Cristina and Bianca. Names that were not in any police records. Disappearances that were never connected. Families that Ricardo had destroyed without a trace." "How many?" Mauricio asked, his voice low. "In total? I lost count after the 5th family," Ricardo replied, as if he were talking about time. Ricardo's confession opened a box of horrors that no one was prepared to face. He provided details of crimes committed in 5 different states over the course of 15 years. Always the same pattern. He approached single mothers, gained their trust, abused their daughters, and when discovered, killed them both. Then he disappeared, assuming a new identity. In exchange for the information, he got the deal he wanted. But even with his information, not all the bodies were found. "I can't remember some places anymore," he admitted without remorse. Others, nature must have claimed. The case gained national proportions. Ricardo Mendez was identified as one of the worst serial killers in the country's history. Newspapers called him the monster of families. Every week, new victims were identified through his testimony. Families finally knew what had happened to their daughters, sisters, and mothers. For Detective Mauricio, the case became an obsession. He visited Ricardo weekly, extracting every scrap of information that could lead to more victims. "Why are you telling me all this now?" he once asked. Ricardo, already comfortable in his role as a crime celebrity, replied with disturbing candor, "Because now I am somebody. Everyone knows my name. Everyone knows my story. That's more than most people get in a lifetime." Over the next few months, the investigation team put together a complete map of Ricardo's crimes. 15 families destroyed, 32 lives lost. Numbers that would leave anyone stunned. The trial was watched nationwide. Ricardo, always smiling for the cameras, seemed to enjoy the attention. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence. DNA, recorded confessions, the bodies found. The defense did not even try to deny the crimes. It simply argued that the defendant was insane. "This man has a serious mental illness," the appointed attorney claimed. "He does not understand the nature of his actions." But the psychiatric experts disagreed. "Mr. Mendez is fully aware of his actions," Dr. Silvera testified. "Not only does he know that what he does is wrong, he takes elaborate precautions to avoid being caught. This shows premeditation and an understanding of the consequences." In the courtroom, relatives of the victims hugged each other, crying. Ana's mother held a photo of her daughter and granddaughter. "He took everything from me," she told reporters. "I wish he would never see the light of day again." The sentiment was shared by everyone. No one who looked at Ricardo, with his calm smile and empty eyes, could feel any sympathy. When it was time for Ricardo to testify, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. He walked to his chair with the relaxed posture of someone on a casual date. He swore to tell the truth in the same voice he had used to gain the trust of so many women. During the first few questions, he kept his answers short. Yes, he had killed those people. Yes, he had planned it all. No, he was not sorry. But when asked why, Ricardo finally showed some emotion. "You wouldn't understand," he said, his voice suddenly low. "No one understands what it's like to grow up the way I did." For the first time, he spoke about his own childhood, about his mother who brought different men into the home, about the abuse he suffered, about how he learned early on that the world was divided into predators and prey. "I just chose which side I wanted to be on," he concluded. The prosecutor showed no sympathy. "A lot of people have difficult childhoods, Mr. Mendez, and they don't become killers." Ricardo shrugged. "Maybe they didn't learn their lesson the way I did." When asked if he felt remorse, Ricardo looked directly at the victims' families. "The only mistake I made was getting caught," he replied. In the audience, a woman fainted. Another screamed. The judge called for order. On the last day of the trial, the prosecutor made a disturbing discovery. Digging into Ricardo's past, they found his first crime. At age 16, he had killed his own mother and her boyfriend, making it look like a murder-suicide. The police believed the story of the frightened teenager who said he had found the bodies when he came home from school. "This is not a man who became a monster because of circumstances," the prosecutor argued. "This is someone who chose this path from an early age." In closing arguments, the prosecution asked for the maximum sentence for each crime, to be served consecutively. "There is no punishment sufficient for what this man did," he concluded, "but we can make sure he never has the chance to hurt another family again." The defense tried to argue about his traumatic past, but their case was already lost. The eyes of everyone in the courtroom turned to Ricardo. He remained impassive, as if watching a boring movie. When the judge asked for his last words, Ricardo finally stood up. For a moment, it seemed like he was going to say something meaningful, maybe a plea for forgiveness. But then he just smiled and said, "I'm already writing a book about all this. It's going to be a bestseller." The sentence was announced a week later. Ricardo Mendez was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, without the possibility of parole. The judge made a point of looking him in the eye as he handed down each sentence. "So that you can be sure," he explained, "that every life you took is being accounted for." Ricardo was taken to a maximum security penitentiary, where he would be held in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. Even among criminals, there were codes, and those who hurt children were at the bottom of the hierarchy. For Detective Mauricio, the case was closed, but the wounds remained raw. On silent nights, he still revisited the files. He still wondered if there were more victims that Ricardo had not revealed. He still saw the faces of the girls lost in his dreams. The police psychologist warned him about the dangers of getting too involved. "You need to put this behind you," he advised. "He's already in jail. He can't hurt anyone anymore." Mauricio nodded, but he knew it wasn't easy. The harm that Ricardo had inflicted continued to reverberate, in the families destroyed, in the lives interrupted, in the trust broken, in the fear that now existed where before there had been only innocence. 6 months after his conviction, Mauricio received an anonymous package. Inside was a school notebook. On the cover was Julia's name. It was the diary that had never been found in its entirety. The pages told of the horror the girl had experienced, how Ricardo had first gained her trust, then begun to violate her boundaries, and finally threatened her if she told anyone. The last entries were the hardest to read. "Mommy finally realized," one said. "We're going to run away tomorrow." And then, the last page. "He found the suitcases. He's furious. God, please help us." Mauricio sat down. feeling the weight of those words. Who had sent the diary? How had he found it? An anonymous note accompanied the notebook. I found this hidden in the house where that monster had lived before. I thought you must have it. Mauricio spent the night reading every word. The next morning, he took the diary to the memorial site for the victims, a small garden with a plaque bearing all their names. He left the notebook next to the flowers. It was time for Júlia to finally rest. Let them all rest. As for Ricardo, he would receive what he deserved, to be forgotten, while the names of his victims would be remembered. 5 years have passed since Ricardo Mendes was convicted. His case has become the subject of documentaries, books, and even a film. The man who destroyed so many families was now an almost mythical figure in the popular imagination. The family monster was studied in criminology schools. Everyone wanted to understand how someone could commit so many atrocities without remorse. Ricardo served his sentence in isolation. He received letters from distraught admirers who saw him as an anti-hero. He answered them all, fueling his fame. He gave interviews to researchers, always manipulating the narrative to appear more intelligent than he was. Detective Mauricio, now head of the department, moved on with his life. He got married and had a daughter. He tried not to think about Ricardo, but the case followed him like a shadow. From time to time, he received calls from journalists wanting to speak about the case that defined his career. He always refused. For Mauricio, talking about Ricardo was giving him what he wanted: attention. One ordinary morning, while he was drinking coffee at his desk, Mauricio received a phone call from the penitentiary. "Detective," the warden said, "Ricardo wants to speak to you. He says he has something important to confess." Mauricio drove to the penitentiary with a sense of déjà vu. 5 years had passed, but it seemed as if the case had never ended. In the visitor's room, he found a different Ricardo. Thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes. The isolation had taken its toll. "Thank you for coming," Ricardo said, his voice rougher than before. "I thought you would refuse." Mauricio sat across from him, separated by thick glass. "The warden said you have something to confess," he replied dryly. Ricardo nodded, a familiar gleam returning to his eyes. "There's more," he said simply. "More than I told you." Mauricio felt his stomach sink. "More victims?" "Yes. 3 families I never mentioned." Mauricio took a deep breath. He thought this chapter of his life was closed, that all the victims had been found, that all the families had received answers. He was wrong. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. Ricardo hesitated, something unusual for him. "I'm dying," he said. "Terminal cancer. I have months to live according to the doctors." Mauricio studied him, looking for signs of a lie. "If it's true, why do you bother confessing now?" Ricardo gave a half smile. "I don't care about the victims, but I want my legacy to be complete." Mauricio recorded every word as Ricardo detailed his undisclosed crimes. 3 families, 6 more victims. Crimes in small towns where disappearances were rarely linked to a larger pattern. Elena and her daughter Luisa were the first, Ricardo said, his voice monotone as if he were talking about a shopping list. It was in 2006 in Ribeirão Claro. "I met Elena at church. She cleaned the place on Sundays. She was 32, Luisa was 9. Mauricio wrote down every detail: locations, dates, methods. His hand shook. Then came Teresa and her 2 daughters, Carla and Marina, 11-year-old twins. That was in Alto Paraíso, 2009. Ricardo spoke with clinical precision, without emotion, as if the lives he had taken were just numbers. And lastly, Deborah and Aline, 2011, in Tres Coroas. Mauricio stopped writing. 3 crowns? That's in the south of the country. You never mentioned being there." Ricardo shrugged. "There are many things I never mentioned." Mauricio felt a chill, How many more secrets did this man keep? How many more lives had he destroyed? "Where are the bodies?" he asked, his voice firmer than he felt. "I can show you on the maps," Ricardo replied. "But I want something in return." "There is no negotiation possible," Mauricio said firmly. "You've already been sentenced to life in prison several times over. There's no way to reduce your sentence." Ricardo laughed, a hollow, lifeless sound. "I don't want a reduction in sentence. What good would that do me? I'm dying, remember?" His eyes fixed on Mauricio with intensity. "I want you to write my story. A book. The complete truth about Ricardo Mendez." Mauricio almost choked on the absurdity of the request. "You're joking." "I've never been so serious," Ricardo replied. "All those authors, documentary filmmakers, they never really understood. You did. You hunted me. You know me better than anyone." Mauricio shook his head in disgust. "I'm not going to help make you a celebrity." Ricardo leaned forward. "It's not about fame. It's about the truth. About showing the world what goes on in the mind of someone like me." His voice lowered. "And in return, I'll tell you everything. Every victim. Every location. No more secrets." Mauricio knew he should refuse. He knew it was wrong to give this monster what he wanted, immortality through his infamy. But he also knew there were families still waiting for answers. People who didn't know what had happened to their daughters, their sisters, their mothers. For weeks, Mauricio struggled with the decision. He argued with his wife, with colleagues, even with the psychologist. "He's manipulating you," they all said. And Mauricio knew they were right. But when he slept, he saw the faces of the victims who had not been found. The families who did not know that their hopes were in vain. Finally, he made his choice. He returned to the penitentiary with a tape recorder and a notebook. "I will document your story," he told Ricardo, "but not the way you want. It will not be about you, the fascinating monster. It will be about your victims, about the lives you destroyed, about the justice that finally reached them all." Ricardo looked disappointed but nodded. "As long as my name is there, that people know what I did, how I did it." Over the next few months, Mauricio visited Ricardo twice a week. He heard confessions that made him vomit later. He wrote down details that kept him awake at night. And with each new piece of information, search teams found more victims. More families got answers. When the book was published a year later, Ricardo had already died in his cell. The title was not his name, as he had wanted. It was, for them, the lives behind the Mendez case. There was no photo of the killer on the cover, only a lit candle symbolizing the memory of each life lost. You've heard stories of men who hide monsters in their homes, men like Ricardo Mendez, who infiltrate vulnerable families, who gain their trust only to destroy lives. But what about when it's the other way around? When psychopathy hides behind a kiss, a loving message, or an "I love you"? In the next video, you will learn about the profile of psychopathic girlfriends who manipulate, isolate, and in many cases, destroy lives in silence. Women who, like Ricardo, study their victims, who create perfect masks of love, who know exactly how to make you doubt your own sanity while they execute meticulous plans, because evil has no gender, and the warning signs are often the same, regardless of who presents them. Closing with a subtle and symbolic CTA. Not every nightmare starts with a scream. Sometimes it starts with a hug. Subscribe, share. You'll need to recognize the signs before it's too late, for you or someone you love.